Hello, everyone. Today we're delving deeper into our discussion on Stoicism. Following the keen interest in my first video on the subject, which laid the groundwork for this ancient philosophy, it seems fitting to offer a second episode to explore another facet of Stoicism. As a reminder, Stoicism is a philosophical school originating from ancient Greece, founded in the 3rd century BCE by Zeno of Citium. This movement stands out for its holistic approach, combining theory and practice. Stoicism is not merely a theoretical framework for understanding the world. It also aims to transform our actions and behaviors. Fundamentally, Stoicism is an ethics, from the Greek ethos, meaning behavior, which guides individuals on the path to happiness through wisdom and self-mastery. It teaches how to live in harmony with life's events by accepting what is beyond our control and acting virtuously on what we can influence. According to Stoicism, ultimate happiness lies in wisdom, meaning a deep understanding of the order of the world that allows one to be emotionally unaffected by life's ups and downs. The Stoic sage, by understanding the world and accepting its natural order, achieves a state of inner tranquility and peace, which is considered true happiness. This philosophy is not just theoretical, but applies in daily actions, offering a way of being and living that leads to autonomy and inner freedom in the face of often unpredictable external circumstances. Stoicism thus guides us on how to act to be happy, offering us the tools to achieve serenity and balance in our lives. Today, we'll explore these concepts in more detail and understand how they can be applied in our modern lives to enhance our well-being and effectiveness in facing the challenges of daily life. Before we proceed further, it's essential to clarify an important distinction between morality and ethics. I mentioned earlier that Stoicism is an ethics, and it's crucial to understand how it differs from morality. Morality is a set of behavioral rules dictated by a clear distinction between right and wrong. As discussed in our previous conversation on Nietzsche, considering right and wrong involves treating them as absolute and transcendental, demanding unconditional obedience from us. In morality, we're not supposed to question these rules. We follow them without deliberation. This notion is often illustrated in child rearing. When a child makes a mistake or breaks a moral rule, they are usually punished. Morality thus operates on a principle of imperative, where obedience is mandatory and unquestionable. This concept of command is palpable in religious moral structures, where disobedience to divine laws leads to severe punishments, such as damnation or divine judgment. The formulation, "act in this way," recalls Kant's categorical imperative, which commands behaving in a manner that our actions could be elevated to the status of a universal principle. Morality, in this sense, suggests that our choices are not truly our own. We are obligated to follow a predetermined path with no room for personal reflection or choice. In contrast, ethics, particularly in the context of Stoicism, is not simply a set of rules to blindly follow. Ethics involves a dimension of reflection and adaptation of principles to concrete situations. It aims not only to understand the world, but also to actively influence our actions accordingly. Stoicism, as an ethics, therefore seeks to equip the individual with the wisdom necessary to navigate the complexities of life by acting in an informed manner to achieve happiness and inner tranquility. In our previous discussion, we addressed the crucial distinction between morality and ethics. Morality, let's recall, is a set of rigid rules that dictate what is right or wrong, often without leaving room for deliberation or learning from our mistakes. In morality, if we deviate from established commandments, we are inevitably punished and rarely given the opportunity to correct our actions. Morality and responsibility. Morality is characterized by its imperative approach, dictating conformity without question. In contrast, ethics operates differently. It doesn't command, it recommends. Rather than imposing behavior, ethics warns us about the consequences of our actions. It informs us of the possible outcomes of our choices without imposing strict imperatives. Thus, ethics relies on individual responsibility. We are accountable for our actions and must bear the consequences. For instance, if you decide to steal your neighbor's car, ethics warns you of possible consequences, such as retaliation from the neighbor, arrest, or legal conviction. This approach leaves the choice to the individual whether to transgress the rule or not, but they must also accept the consequences of their choice. Model of good conduct. Whether in morality or ethics, the existence of a model of good conduct is presupposed. This model suggests that certain actions are preferable to others, thus imposing a framework for our behavior. In the context of morality, this model is often dictated by religious or societal norms, such as the Ten Commandments or other religious precepts. In ethics, although actions are not prescribed as rigidly, there is still an implication that some actions are wiser or more just because of their consequences. Whether through the rigor of morality or the counsel of ethics, we are guided by a framework aimed at shaping our actions to align with a certain conception of the good. These two approaches seek to direct our behavior, albeit in different ways, toward what is perceived as beneficial or right in a given context. In the context of Stoic teachings, the ideal model of conduct is not found in religious commandments like the Ten Commandments of the Old Testament, the teachings of Christ in the Gospels, or the Five Pillars of Islam. For Stoics, the guide for good conduct is embodied by universal laws and cosmic order. According to Stoicism, this behavioral model does not rely on a transcendent authority outside our world, but on principles that are inherently linked to the universe itself, which is termed the universal reason. Stoics believe in a natural and cosmic order, composed of a set of principles and laws that ensure the proper functioning and viability of our world. If planets were to deviate from their established trajectories, thus violating this cosmic order, the universe as we know it would cease to exist. Such a departure from universal laws would lead to the total collapse of the cosmos. The Greek term cosmos, meaning order or harmony, emphasizes that the very existence of the universe depends on an underlying order. This concept may seem abstract, but it is in fact the foundation of many modern scientific inquiries. Physicists and cosmologists study the laws governing the universe, asserting that any alteration of these laws would radically alter our reality. When discussing the laws of the universe, we refer to principles governing physical phenomena that, if changed, would render our universe unrecognizable. The notion of physical law implies the existence of an underlying principle, an invisible regulatory force that guides observable phenomena. These laws are not random or irregular. They do not have the ability to spontaneously change. Mention of physical law evokes a concept that transcends purely physical phenomena because, although not directly observable, these laws are not themselves physical in nature. This idea underscores that behind the apparent framework of the physical world lies a reality that transcends the material, or which, while rooted in the physical, transcends its immediate limits. In Stoicism, this conception is manifested in the union of physics and metaphysics, where the traditional distinction between these two disciplines disappears. Stoic physics is inherently infused with metaphysics, a symbiosis that is readily understood through the law of causality. This law establishes that a cause produces a specific effect, and that the same causes invariably produce the same effects. Of course, exact reproducibility of phenomena in experiments is complicated because, by definition, phenomena never reproduce in exactly the same way, if only because they do not occur at the same instant. However, the law of causality is constantly verified in daily life. Take the simple example of dropping a glass of water. It will fall and shatter on the floor, a predictable and consistent consequence that does not need testing to be certain. You know full well that if you drop your glass of water, it won't float or fall upward. You understand the physical laws, especially that of gravity, and know what will happen when you drop the glass. It will fall. The law of causality emphasizes that an action will inevitably lead to an effect directly linked to that action. There is no independence between cause and effect. Rather, there is a link of necessity, meaning that the effect cannot occur otherwise than as it does. Take a non-physical example to illustrate that the law of causality governs all aspects of our reality. Imagine you approach someone on the street with insults or derogatory comments. The person's reaction may vary. They may respond aggressively, ignore you, or react in some other negative manner. Your hostile action will likely provoke some form of hostile reaction because by acting in this way, you initiate a chain of causality where your aggression invites a counter-reaction. This reaction may vary, ranging from a verbal response to a physical act of defense, but rarely to a warm welcome, as the nature of your action determines the nature of the response. A hostile action will generally elicit a hostile reaction. In other words, the universe will respond to your actions. This reaction is the direct effect of your actions, which are the cause. Thus, the law of causality extends not only to physical phenomena, but also to human interactions and our daily choices. Human reactions, though less mechanical than those of inanimate objects, are influenced by various psychological, emotional, and contextual factors, which may vary from person to person in response to the same cause. However, causality, according to the Stoics, governs everything. It cannot be ignored. Equipped with reason and discernment, we can adjust our actions in consideration of this universal law. The Stoics emphasize that the first step towards good conduct and happiness is recognizing the law of causality, which governs and encompasses everything. Every action has consequences, which become causes of new effects. For the Stoics, becoming wise means understanding the order of the world. By grasping this order, we can live in harmony with cosmic laws in accordance with natural order. Proper behavior for the Stoics is one that not only mimics but is inspired by natural order. By acting in accordance with this order, we integrate with it, becoming an expression of cosmic order. As individuals, we are both a part of the world and a manifestation of this universal order. To achieve happiness, it is essential to align with cosmic order. For the Stoics, this begins with understanding the physics of the world, which leads to metaphysics, i.e., the laws governing physical phenomena. Once this cosmic order is apprehended, we can begin to reflect it in our behaviors. This transforms us from mere isolated entities in the universe into true terrestrial embodiments of this cosmic order. Stoicism, as a comprehensive philosophy, encompasses physics, metaphysics, and an ethics stemming from these disciplines. Physics leads us to metaphysics, which in turn shapes our ethics. This integration shows that in ancient philosophy, physics, metaphysics, and ethics are interdependent and inseparable. To dissociate them would be to ignore the laws of correspondence that unite these domains. The next step is to determine how to act in accordance with this natural order and embody cosmic order. According to the Stoics, nature constantly sends us signals that should guide our behavior. It is by perceiving and correctly interpreting these signals that we can steer our actions virtuously, i.e., in imitation of natural order. Ignoring these signals, or not listening to the information that nature sends us, can lead us away from the path of virtue and make us incompatible with the cosmic harmony that governs everything. If we do not listen to the signals of nature, we will suffer because the laws of nature guide our actions to avoid this suffering. Nature acts as an encrypted manual for achieving happiness. When we suffer, there is always an underlying reason, although it may not be immediately apparent or may be deeply buried. Suffering is never without a response. It is always a reaction to a cause. The Stoics teach us that in the face of suffering, the first question to ask ourselves is, why are we suffering? Where does my suffering come from? What is the cause of which my suffering is the consequence? By understanding the cause of our suffering, we follow the logic of the law of causality that governs the world. Everything is rational. Everything is a reaction to a cause. But what is the reason for our suffering, especially when we do not feel we have acted in a way that would justify this suffering? It is relatively simple to understand the causes of physical suffering, such as a hangover or injuries from a fall, due to our knowledge of physical laws. However, when it comes to inner suffering, the distress of the soul, understanding the cause to free ourselves becomes more complex. The key, according to the Stoics, to understanding and alleviating this inner suffering lies in our desire for things to happen differently than they actually do. What torments our soul is the desire for the order of things to be different, for the realities of life to be not as they are, but as we would like them to be. To take a simple analogy, it's like hoping for it to be 35 degrees Celsius in the middle of winter. The problem doesn't lie in winter itself, but in our desire for things to be other than they are. It's a concept easy to grasp in daily life. For example, if you see that it's raining in the morning before you go out, you'll take an umbrella and dress accordingly. You wouldn't say, "Today, I wish it were sunny, so I'll wear a t-shirt and hope the weather changes for me." you know you don't have the power to change the climate. However, humans often think they can, or would like to, influence the order of things around them. They like to believe they can achieve results without making the necessary efforts. Take the example of someone who wants to become wealthy simply by desiring it. If this desire doesn't translate into concrete actions to achieve this goal, this person condemns themselves to unhappiness, disappointment, and frustration, as they will never see their desire fulfilled. This is an extreme example, but we are all affected by this tendency to desire results without assuming the causes. Causes require efforts, and often we are reluctant to provide them. We would like consequences to manifest without causes. Similarly, we sometimes wish causes wouldn't lead to consequences. For example, we might wish to insult someone on the street without eliciting a hostile response in return. Though this is an exaggeration, the underlying idea is that we would like our actions not to generate the natural responses they are likely to provoke. We often operate in ways that involve acting without considering the unpleasant consequences of our actions. We do things and are surprised by the reactions they provoke. For example, someone who chooses to live selfishly, refusing to share, help, or listen, finds themselves isolated when they themselves need help. Then, this person complains about the injustice of the world, believing that the universe is conspiring against them. There's a tendency to take things personally, to not recognize that mechanisms govern reality and that we are not specifically targeted by them. The law of causality is not a personal curse. It wasn't designed to harm us, but to help us understand how to avoid suffering. Certainly, there are times when suffering seems unjust, not stemming directly from our actions, but often it's the direct consequence of our behaviors. An individual who lives selfishly shouldn't be surprised to encounter indifference in return. Likewise, one who sows violence shouldn't be astonished if one day that violence turns against them. It is in this distinction between morality and ethics that we see that ethics does not function like an authority imposing strict rules, but rather as a guide that illuminates our choices and their implications. Ethics teaches us to be aware of the effects of our actions and to take responsibility for what we choose to do, recognizing that every action triggers a reaction within the inevitable framework of the law of causality. The torment of the soul is not caused by a malevolent external world, but rather by our inability to understand the source of our suffering. It stems from our own being, and we have the ability to change our states of mind by altering how we perceive the events around us. Instead of seeing suffering as an injustice imposed by the world, we might ask ourselves what we can do in the face of it. The Stoics would advise us to accept, for to refuse would actually be the source of our pain. What makes us suffer is not so much what happens to us, but our reaction to these events, our refusal to accept them. We suffer because of the interpretation we make of our experiences, not necessarily the experiences themselves. This interpretation breeds emotions such as resentment, worry, jealousy, bitterness, or regret, turning our minds into centers of pain. The non-acceptance of reality is what truly makes us suffer, not the events themselves. We cannot control the world to meet our desires, but we can learn to accept that the cosmic order cannot be otherwise. By understanding this, we have the power to diminish our suffering. When we encounter aspects of reality beyond our control, our ability to accept them as they are is crucial. The torment of the soul arises when we refuse the world to be as it is, when we struggle against the established order of things. This refusal to submit to reality, this resistance to universal reason, is the root of much inner suffering. This problem of soul torment is uniquely human. Unlike animals, primarily guided by instinct and lacking the faculty to question their genetically programmed behavior, humans have the capacity for choice. We have the ability to follow or deviate from natural recommendations, to obey or disobey our instinct. This power of decision, this faculty to say yes or no, defines us as human beings. Fundamentally, choice embodies the possibility of creating alternatives to natural order, of disobeying, deviating, or diverging from the predetermined path. Thus, choosing becomes synonymous with the possibility of error or wandering, as departing from the natural path opens the door to potentially erroneous or harmful consequences. Taking a path diverging from natural order can lead us astray, especially when there are numerous possible paths. Following a single path is often simpler, but the diversity of choices makes decisions more complex. This complexity is sometimes linked to intelligence, which allows for the visualization of several possible routes, sometimes even flirting with suffering or madness. Indeed, intelligence implies the ability to explore various thought paths, but also the difficulty of choosing among them. Making a choice inevitably involves relinquishing other options, and letting go can be a source of suffering. When our desires go beyond what is necessary for survival, as is the case with animals, we often aspire to things out of reach or beyond our control. This is where the problem of choice lies, in the ability to deviate from the optimal path. This dilemma is underscored by the figure of Satan in the thought of the 19th century Russian anarchist Bakunin, who saw Satan as the bearer of choice for humanity. Etymologically, the devil represents division, duality, and choice emerges with this duality. It's the classic image of the little angel and the little devil vying for attention on our shoulders, illustrating the moment when an alternative presents itself and when choice begins. For Bakunin, the birth of freedom lies in the moment when a single path diverges, thus offering the possibility of choosing another way, of transgressing. This notion is illustrated by the biblical myth of Adam and Eve, where the serpent embodies choice and the responsibility that ensues by enticing them to taste the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Thus, Satan symbolizes both the progenitor of freedom and the possibility of choice, but also the source of human misery, as misery seems absent when following a path without questioning, doubt, regret, or bitterness for failing to see other possible paths. The human dilemma thus lies in choice, which can lead to error and consequently to suffering. If we were to retain two essential ideas from this discussion on suffering, it would be that, firstly, suffering often stems from a reality's response to our actions. Secondly, we possess the power to modulate our suffering by changing how we perceive events. Thus, we have two levers of action. One involves adapting our behavior to reality, and the other involves adjusting our perception of events to universal reason. By acting on our representation of things through reason, we can neutralize suffering, soothe our torment, and find inner peace. This peace is achieved by aligning our thoughts with events, thereby harmonizing our individual reason with universal reason. When this alignment is successful, torment disappears as we fully accept things as they are, embracing the order of the world. We accept things as they are, as an inevitable necessity, as something we cannot change. Understanding why things are as they are is to learn the rules of nature, which enables us not to be affected by the world, not to suffer from the world. This frees us from the torment linked to the desire for things to be different from what they are. By aligning our reason with universal reason, we stop wishing for things to be different. Instead, we wish for them to be as they must be. Everything happens for a reason, and there is always meaning behind every event. Our inability to immediately perceive this meaning can plunge us into torment, refusal, and incomprehension. Misunderstanding is a major source of torment. You could argue that while we may be aware that there is a reason for what happens, it is sometimes difficult to know that reason. In these moments, the key is to trust reason. This trust in reason is not blind faith like in religion, nor the result of unfounded belief, but the result of understanding that reason governs everything. This assurance comes from our knowledge that reason is omnipresent and that everything has a reason for being, even events that seem most absurd to us. What we call absurd is often just a label we attach to what we do not yet understand. What seems incomprehensible is only so from the perspective of our limited minds, but in reality, nothing escapes universal reason. Everything is understandable because everything has a reason to exist. Nothing happens without cause, even if that cause exceeds our current understanding or cognitive abilities. Just because we do not understand a cause does not mean it does not exist. It simply exists on a level we have not yet reached. Adopting a rationalist perspective means recognizing that everything is governed by reason, including what seems absurd to us. The absurd does not escape the logic of reason. It only escapes our current ability to grasp it. This does not mean we are omniscient or that we can understand everything. There are realities we fail to grasp, But not understanding them should not prevent us from recognizing that there is underlying logic. Recognizing that everything is governed by reason helps us accept things as they are, to see them as inevitable necessities, to understand that things cannot be otherwise. This understanding transforms our approach to life. Instead of struggling against reality, we learn to harmonize with it. Of course, it is easy to say, let us accept that everything has a reason and that things are as they must be. Saying this is simple, but putting this acceptance into practice is more complicated, though not impossible. It depends on our choice. We can choose to continually lament, to indulge in our suffering, to feed on our own torment, or we can choose to accept, to trust in the logic of the world, in this reason that seeks not to harm us, but simply emanates from the natural functioning of the universe. There are things that depend on us and others that do not. Often, our torment arises from our inability to distinguish between the two, from our reluctance to accept that some things are beyond our control. Recognizing and accepting this distinction is the first step to living in peace with the world and with ourselves. By focusing on what is beyond our control, we neglect our true abilities. We become ungrateful for our own power to influence our path, thus depriving ourselves of our freedom of action. Reason, which should be our guide, is ignored, leading to self-sabotage. Recognizing our power over our actions gives us the chance to act justly and make beneficial choices for ourselves. Often, the events we experience are the result of our own actions. If we ignore our ability to influence our lives, we relinquish our responsibility in our own experiences. Blaming the world for our unhappiness is to grant it authority over us, reducing us to the role of slaves. We are not slaves, we are the masters of our destiny. Becoming aware of this means recognizing that logic and reason are on our side, and that by understanding the causes, we align ourselves with them. We thus elevate our existence, becoming almost divine, ultimately finding harmony and inner peace. Thank you.